Welcome! In this video, I will create a Gantt chart to show the hire dates of assets and also show when the assets are available for hire. The data only provides information regarding when the asset is on hire. The hire period will be shown in the chart, and then I will create a section to show when it is available for hire. This is my data. The first column contains the name of the asset available for hire, and there are 4 assets here. The next column contains information on the hire start dates. Then we have the hire end dates, and then we have the name of the company to which the assets are being hired. In the reports section, I will start by importing a Gantt chart from the App Store. Select Get More Visuals, search for Gantt, and the visualization I will use is the Microsoft Certified Gantt chart. And I click to add that to my report. Once imported, I then just click to add the Gantt chart to the report page. Into the Gantt chart from my hire periods table, I put asset into task. I drag hire start date into start date. And I put hire end date into end date. And then if I scroll down to resource, I click hired to and drag that into that field. If I now make my Gantt chart a bit bigger, you can see that the hire periods for the assets have been listed. What I would like to do though is have just one row per asset. At the moment, if you scrolled down your Gantt chart, you will see that each hire period is listed rather than listed per asset. To do this, I just go to my visualization pane and click on the Format button. In general, I change Group Tasks toggle to on. And now there is just one row for each asset. The next thing I will change while I'm still in the Format pane is, rather than having the weeks being the default up here as on the timeline, I would like it to be months. So if I scroll down in my Format pane, in date type, I change it from week to month. And the timeline across the top has now updated. The next thing I would like to do is put the assets in alphabetical order. To do that, I just go to the 3 dots at the top of the diagram, go to Sort Access, and then select Asset. Previously, the order of these assets was determined by the earliest start date, hence why the title is showing earliest hire. I would like to change the title. So back in the Format pane, in General, in Title, I will just change the text to say Asset Hire. And that is effectively the first stage of creating the Gantt chart completed. I would like to take it a step further and show the periods for which the assets are available for hire. To try and help explain this next section, I have put the data into a table on the report page. If we look at asset B, we can see that the hire date ends on the 31st of December 2022, and the next hire date starts on the 1st of February 2023. To calculate the period available for hire, I effectively need to get the 21st of December 2022 onto the same row as the 1st of February 2023. And currently, as you can see, they're on different rows. So that's what we will now look to do. So I go into transform data. The first thing I will do is make sure that the assets are sorted in alphabetical order. So click the drop down list and sort ascending. The next thing I will do is make sure that the hire start dates are in ascending order. So again, click on the drop down list and click sort ascending. I will now duplicate this query. So clicking on hired periods, select duplicate. I will come back to the first query in a moment, but in the second query I will now add a couple of columns. So click add column, index column, and I'm going to insert an index column starting from 0. I'll add a second column and it's going to be another index column. So again, clicking the drop down list, and this time I want to have the index starting at 1. The reason I've added these two index columns is in a moment I'm going to merge this query with itself. And in doing so, I'm going to match number 1 with number 1, number 2 with number 2. And what that will do is bring the hire end date down a row. So for example, in row 9, the 15th of February 2023 will still show in row 9, but it will also show in a new column in row 10. So if I go to merge queries, click the drop down list and click merge queries. Now in the first section, I click on the index column, the one that starts with the digit 0, and then I'm going to hold down Control on my computer and also click on the asset, because when we merge we want the indexes to match, but we also want the assets to match. If we don't match asset with the right asset, what we can accidentally end up doing is having the hire period end for one asset and show the available period commencing for a completely different asset. So we don't want the assets to get mixed up. So hence why we have a 1 here and a 2 here. We want them both to be looked at when we do the merge. So I click the drop down list and select hire periods to current, the current table. And this time I'm going to select the index column, then hold down my Control button and select asset. As you can see, the selection matches 6 of 10 rows. So I click OK. I'll then expand the table. I don't require index.1, index, hire 2 or hire start, so I will remove them. I'll leave the asset in the meantime just to prove that our merge has worked as expected. So if I click on OK, I don't require index or index 1, so I will remove these columns, and then this will just make it easier to see the results of my merge. So if I remove the columns. Now if we look for asset D in row 9, we can see the hire end was the 15th of February 2023, and if we go down to row 10, we can see that the 15/2/2023 now appears. This is going to allow us to compare the hire end here with the hire start of the next contract. We can see that in the column added index1.asset that the assets match with the original asset. So we've got B and B, B and B, C and C. So we don't now require this column here. So I can remove that column. I can also remove the hire 2 because I don't require that column. And I can also remove the hire end because I don't require that column either. So if I now delete these 3 columns, remove, I'm not interested in the rows which have null. I'm only interested in calculating at this period the available sections. So I click the drop down list and untick null. Click OK. The next thing I will do is, this is the hire end date. So the available date is actually +1. to these dates. So if it ends on the 15th of February, it's really available from the 16th of February. So to do that, I will add a new column, custom column. I will call the column available from. Then I'm adding one day onto my added index.1 higher end date. So I just do date, add days, bracket, and into the bracket I click my added index1.higher end, then do a comma and put 1 and then close the bracket. Because I'm adding one day on to the index higher end, click OK. I then change my format to date. I now need to calculate when it's available to, and it's going to be available to one day before the hire start. So in a similar way, I add a custom column. I'll call it available to, and then date, add days, bracket. This time I'll use the hire start, comma, and I want to go back one day, so I do -1, then close the bracket. Click OK, and then change the format to date. I'm going to add a column called available, and it will become clearer in the next stage why I'm doing this, so please just go with it for the moment. So add custom column. I'll call it available, and into here double quote marks and then put the word available, because I want that word to appear for all rows in this query. So I click OK. I no longer require my hire start or my hire end, because all I am concerned with in this query is calculating the available periods. So I will delete these two columns. This leaves me with 4 columns: asset, available from, available to, and available. If I go back to my original hire period query, you can see I had 4 columns here: asset, hire start, hire end, and hire to. I'd like to append both these tables together. And to do that, I need to make sure that the names match and the type matches. Therefore, at this stage, I'm going to rename my columns. I still want this one to be called asset. I'll change this one to start, this one to end, and this one I will just call hired. If I go back to the second query which I created, hire period 2s, again I'll change the name of the columns, so this one becomes start, this one becomes end, this one becomes hired, and I need to change the type to match my other query. So here I click on the ABC 1, 2, 3 and click text. Now if I go back to my hire periods, in home, if I click on append queries, the table to append, it's going to be my hire periods 2. Click OK, and the table has been successfully appended. If I click on hire periods 2, then right click, I am going to deselect enable load because I don't need that query to come into my report. I click close and apply. And as you can see, the available periods are now shown. Putting the word available though in these sections does not appear to be very helpful. Because of the length of the word, yet in some cases the short off-hire period, the word available is effectively scrolling into the name of the company for the next hire period. Therefore, I will remove the word available. So to do that, I'm going to go back into Transform Data, Transform Data, Add Column, Conditional Column. I will call my new column Status, and then I'm going to say that if hired equals available, in my new column, I also want it to show available. Else, if it doesn't show the word available, I want it to show hired. Then click OK. I will change the ABC123 to text. Now I can go back into my hired column and right click on it and replace values. I want to remove the word available, so the value to find is available, and I'm going to replace it with nothing. So I leave the box blank. Click OK. I now go back to my report, so close and apply. If I click on my asset hire chart to select it, then if I take my new column called status and drag it into the legend field, it is now clearer when the assets are available for hire. When it's hired, it's in this purpley blue colour, and when it's off hire, it's in the light blue. And the word available has disappeared, therefore it's not overlapping with the company name anymore. The benefit of this is, given that we have a table down the bottom, if the user wanted to just see the available dates in the status bar, if they click available, the table updates to show available, and if they just wanted to see the hired, both the chart and the table updates to show the hired. As a result of making these changes, I have just noticed something that I forgot to do. So if you look carefully at Asset B, you will see that there is a small line that indicates that it was off hire in April 2023. And indeed, if we look at our table, we can see that for an available period on the 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2023 can end an off hire period before you started an off hire period. To remedy this, I need to take into consideration that assets will come off hire at the end of a contract one day and go immediately back onto hire the next. So to do that, if I go back into Transform Data, I go to Hired Periods 2. In the applied steps, I'm going to go to the line that says Added Custom to and click on it. Then I'm going to add an additional step. What I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the hire start date with the date that I say it is available from. And if these two dates match, then there isn't actually an off hire period. It's gone straight from being on hire on one contract to being on hire the other. So it's not actually available. So if I now click on conditional column, am I sure I want to insert the step? Yes. It doesn't matter the name of my column because I will remove it in a moment. So I'll just call it not off hire. And I need to say if hire start date equals select column available from, then I want to show 1 to represent true, else 0 for false, and click OK. I can now filter out the rows that have a 1, so click the drop down list, untick the 1 and press OK. I can now delete this column because I don't need it. So if I right click and remove, do I want to insert the step? Yes. I now click on Changed Type 3 Applied Step, just to make sure that everything has worked as expected and all looks good. So I go to Home and click Close and Apply. And my chart updates and my table updates. So I've now fixed that error. I can now move on to the next step. So far, we've shown the hire periods for the gaps between contracts. What I would like to do now is show that the assets are available after the current contract ends. So what I will do is show the assets and their availability up until the end of 2023. And to do that, I go into Transform Data. Transform Data. I'm going to duplicate my hire periods table. So duplicate. And in hire periods 3, I'm just going to rename this last period. Then I'm going to remove some of the actions we did to the hire periods query. So replace value gets deleted, change types getting deleted, added conditional column is deleted, append query is deleted, and renamed columns gets deleted. So we're back with our original table after we sorted the rows. We need to make sure that's maintained. I now need to find the last date up to which the asset is hired. And to do that, I'm going to use Group. So in Home, Group By, I want to group by the assets, so that remains. My new column name, I will say Last Hired. And the operation is the maximum of the column Hire End. I want to find the last date the asset is hired up into currently. Click OK. The next thing I need to do is create a column which shows the last date up until which I currently want to show my data. So to do that, I will add a column, custom column, and I will just call this column Period End. And into Period End, so I put in date dot add years because I'm looking to add 1 year on to my current year. Add years. I need to remove the word date, which has appeared in front of date. Then open bracket. And I would like the period to go up to the end of 2023, and I'm currently in 2022. So I will put in date dot end of year, and again remove the extra date that's appeared, bracket, and I then need to look at what today's date is, so I do date time dot local now, again delete the extra words which have appeared, do an opening and closing bracket. Then I need to close this bracket here, my end of year. I've told it to go to the end of this year. So that's what effectively from here is saying, is go to the end of this year. But then I need to add on a year. So I do comma 1, close bracket. Click OK. Then I need to change my type to date. And as you can see, it now shows that the period end is the 31st of December 2023, and I have that for my 4 assets. So the next thing I need to do is, this is when it was last hired, and I then need to make the date it is next available. So to do that, I'm going to do custom column, and the start date of my off hire period is going to be date dot add days bracket, and onto my last hired column I put a comma and I want to add 1 bracket. Then click OK. Change the type to date. Then I need to add a custom column and I need to again say that it's available. Inside double quote marks, type available. Click OK. Change the type to text. I no longer need my last hired column, so I can delete that column. My period end column, I shall rename end because I need it to match my hired periods column names. So I come out of here. I'll drag the start column to show before the end column. I need to change my available name to hired. And the reason for doing that is I need to match the column names in my hired periods table. So it doesn't really matter what's helpful to me in this table, it's what's helpful when I merge. So now I have my 4 columns, and if I go back to hire periods, if I go back into append query, click on that, then click on the settings button, and this time change it to 3 or more tables. And I need to click on last period and add, then click OK. This adds the December 2013 end periods onto the other list of availables. And if you look at the data, you can see down at the bottom that my 4 rows have come in. And the reason for adding it up here is these 4 rows now go through the same transformation as the other data in this table. So now if I click on my bottom row, replace value, you can see the final query. If I go back to home, click close and apply, my Gantt chart has updated to show the available period up until the end of 2023. If you look at the Gantt chart, you will notice that there is no availability period showing from September to October for some of the assets, and that is because this project is a new project, so these assets A, B, C and D are being hired out for the first time, hence they were not available. If, for example, we were doing this discussion in February 2023, if we draw a line down, you would see that the available periods would actually show. So that is the only reason the blue doesn't appear here, because it goes to the first hire period and then it looks to see when the next hire period is and then fills in the gap as being available. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to hear more from me, please click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.